lead trumpet player just swallowed his mouthpiece trying to figure out where to come back in, and the lead guitar player just threw his guitar case right at your head, you know, and with good reason. Now, here are several things to help you avoid that. Let's take the physical part first. When you reach around the drum set, well, you have a fairly small set like this one where you got 150 tom-toms, so I don't care. The principle is the same. You reach from your shoulder. When you reach from the snare drum to the tom-tom, you're not reaching from snare to tom-tom, you're reaching from right here. A couple years ago, a guy came up to me and told me this cymbal was up too high. He said it's unnatural to play a cymbal up there. You shouldn't do it. I thought it was kind of brazen of him to tell me that, but you know, if you analyze it, if I lower that cymbal, then it's going to be overlapping these two cymbals and this drum. Then to keep from hitting it by accident, I've got to move it back. Then I've got to lean out and go way down like that. Where it is, it's a little more than the length of a drumstick from my shoulder. So to reach that cymbal, I don't even have to raise my arm, just barely. It's easy to get to, you know, for example. Thank you. Now, here's a good way to start practicing this. Do it slowly so you don't get too tense, because if you tighten up all the muscles, you're going to get tired quickly and run out of gas and hope the band rescues you with a chord before you have a heart attack, you know. Reach around slowly, get a good solid sound on each drum before you try to move to the next one. One hand at a time, like this. A little bit, doesn't have to be that fast. Get it moving around with one arm, reach more for each drum than you're going to have to. Remembering that this is the key point. One of the problems about getting around any drum set with your left hand, especially if it's a one bass drum set, is the fact that your right leg will probably be somewhere near the center of the bass drum. You'll be forced to turn very slightly to the left to get your foot comfortably on the hi-hat. Now the right shoulder's in the very center of the drum outfit, and the left shoulder's way back over here. I can reach any part of the set easily with the right hand, but from here over, with the left hand, even playing match grip, it's pretty difficult to get over here without turning your body. So very often you may think you got a big hassle with your left arm or your hand, and it's just the position that you're reaching from. You're just that much further away bass here. If you're playing a double bass drum outfit, then the things are probably positioned more symmetrically, so you don't have quite the same problem. But still getting way over there with the left hand is difficult. Here's an easy pattern, say 3 beats on each drum. It's a good one like this. Now, if you want to play it faster, don't get ratcheted back. Set it in tempo. Here's one that you might want to try for last. Remember that I said any pattern at the drum set could be broken down to some combination of single strokes and double strokes. And the more tom-toms you've got in the set, the more important this idea becomes. Let's suppose, for the sake of the demonstration, that you want to play 3 beats on each drum in triplets and keep the pattern going several times. If you're like most of us and you're right-handed, you start out with right-handed single strokes like this. Now you're in trouble. Because even playing match grip, you can't hit this beat, get back under, hit this beat, get back over, get back under, and start the pattern again. You can break your arm, but you can't make that pattern like that. Here's an easy way to do it. In this case, you start on the snare drum with your left hand, 3 single beats. Here's the key. When you get up here, it's 1 with the right, 2 with the left. You got all day to get down here and start the pattern again. Now, let's try it just a little brighter, for example. If you want it to go the other way, you start on the snare drum with the left hand, single strokes. When you get up here, it's left, right, right. Just reverse it. Now the crossovers are not hard if you're willing to start at a reasonable rate of speed and reach for each drum again and get a good solid sound. A good way to get started is with a big tom-tom and a snare drum. 1 beat here, 2 beats here in triplets like this. Here's one you might want to try just for laughs. If you have a setup similar to this one, try this one sometime. The right hand plays 1 beat on each drum in triplets, counterclockwise, opposite the direction of the hands on the clock. The left hand plays 1 beat on each drum, also in triplets, clockwise or the other direction. Then you put those 2 things together. Now, to avoid any form of serious physical injury to yourself, it's a very good idea to start this thing slowly. Once you get control over a pattern, you can always play it faster later. Get the control first. If you're always trying for top speed, you'll never really get a handle on it, you know. I'll do it very slowly, a little faster, then I'll do it fast, show you how you might use it within some other patterns. Everything that you strike. Now here's the first exercise I would give a beginning student, and as I said, I've been playing a long time and I still use it as a warm-up. It's a good one. Starting from here, turn the wrist toward the drum. Strike the drum and return to that starting position without stopping, without hesitating at all, like this. Now the idea is to hesitate a little bit from each stroke, but turn your wrist all the way back. Because when you play fast, you never turn your wrist as far as you can. This wrist turn will account for at least 75% of your technique. If you can't turn your wrist like this with control with both hands, it's going to be almost impossible for you to play certain types of patterns as you develop. So turn your hand as fast as you can, but just stop between each beat so that you can control it and make sure you're getting a good sound. Now if you want to play match grip, that's okay with me. The only instrument in percussion that we don't use match grip on automatically is snare drum, because you use match grip on timpani, xylophone, timbales, bells, you know, marimbas. So if you want to play that way, it's okay with me. It's certainly no big deal, you know. I did see a guy that told me one time he had developed a whole new way of practicing match grip, which I thought looked kind of strange. He was practicing like that. Now that I look back, he looked kind of strange, you know. Those things seem to happen, don't they? In any case, this grip, or so-called traditional grip, goes back to carrying a parade drum. Now, I have my own theory that I made up as to how this grip evolved, and that is that without leg rests, like 200 years ago, they had no leg rests. So what did the drummers at that time know? They picked up the sticks like this, seemed to be a natural thing. In order to play the parade drum, they had to play like that. Now, that's not the most comfortable position, but that's not really the problem. You see, every time the band would make a sharp left turn, some drummer would punch some trumpet player in the eye, you know, or hit the bell of his horn and knock it right up into his teeth, and he couldn't play for about 3 weeks. So all the melody players of the band got together and had a meeting and said, look, we got to make the drummers hold the left hand differently. We had 12 injuries in the band last week, you know. Now, you won't find that in any musicology book, but it's as good as a lot of the other cornball theories I've heard myself according to experts that can't play, and at least it has a few laughs in it. In any case, if you're going to play match grip, then you just do the same thing here as you're doing with the right hand. If you use a traditional grip, which I do because I've been playing this way for years, for the kind of playing I do, it's adequate. And the holding point is with the thumb. First finger's always over the stick. I try and keep the wrist straight along the bottom and the thumb in a straight line with the forearm. If you turn your wrist way in this way, there's not very much power in it. If you do like some kids do that I've seen, bend their hand forward this way and play in that fashion, that's a great technique for dishing out soup in a cafeteria, but it's lousy for snare drum, you know. So obviously that isn't going to work too well. So starting like this, try to keep this arm level. Now, if you think about it, think of all the drummers that you've ever seen that have really good technique. You've never seen one, or at least I never have, who had really good hands, who had the snare drum terribly low. Did you ever see one of these kids at the high school music festival? Like a youngster. My son is 17, he's 6'3", and can bench press 245 pounds with his right arm. You know, he's an athlete nut, you know. I'm a very modern parent. I let him do pretty much as he pleases, you know, within reason, of course. So here's this big, tall kid back there in the drum section. He's got one of those little drum stands that you're only supposed to use at the drum set. And he's back there trying to play a roll like this. If he ever misses a rim shot, he's going to wreck one of his kneecaps, you know. In any case, get the snare drum somewhere around your belt buckle. That's a good starting point. Now, we're not all built the same way, and you can't make the same rules for everybody. But start out in that area and then move the drum down a little or up from that point so that you don't have to reach way down to get to it. Now, you turn the left wrist. The reason so many people have trouble with a traditional grip is this. If you keep this wrist straight along the bottom, what you have to do in order to get any power is you turn towards the drum, and you'll say right about here you make contact. If you keep turning, you'll notice that the stick curves out or curves away from you. The only way to prevent that would be to bend the wrist forward like that, and as we said, there's no strength in it. So you're going to strike the drum before this curving motion begins to take place. So the wrist turn with the left hand would look like this. Now let's go just a little faster. If you can get a reasonably comfortable grip on the stick, let's take a good warm-up exercise. One measure of eighth notes, one measure of quarter notes, one hand at a time. I always think it's a good idea to warm up with hands separately, because if you're always playing both hands at the same time, one hand, usually the right hand, has the tendency to want to carry the left one all the time. If you start patterns always with the left hand, that can be helpful, but that also gets to be uncomfortable sometimes. So do a little practicing hands separately like this. Measure of quarter notes and measure of eighth notes. Now, if you can do this much, you should be aware of the fact that regardless of what style of music you're into, of any kind, there are three things that you must practice if you're really going to develop yourself as a good drummer. And those three things, if you want to call them fundamental skills or rudiments, it's okay with me, pick your own names. But they are single strokes, double strokes, and the buzz. Nothing can be played on a snare drum that is not some combination of those three skills. Grace notes are either singles, doubles, or a buzz played very close to the drum. Every rudiment is a combination of single strokes and double strokes. Any pattern at the drum set, in any style of music, on timpani, xylophone, is a combination of singles and doubles. Isn't it amazing that since those are the two big building blocks in terms of technique, those are the two things most guys are reluctant to practice, because they're hard. But if you can't play singles and doubles, how can you possibly combine those things to make up all the other patterns that you might play at the set? With that in mind, although we're running late today, it's a little early for me, I'll see if I can demonstrate some single strokes for you in the traditional manner from slow to fast. Watch the wrist turn and the hand position, everything that we've been talking about up to this point. See how easy that is. I guess about 5 hours a day for 2 years will take care of that rudiment, and you can rush right on to the next one, you know. I don't think it's really that tough. I said that once at a clinic, and there was a little guy about 9 years old in the front row, and I suggested practicing 5 hours a day for 2 years, and only one thing, his eyes just rolled right back into his head, and he was out cold. It took us a half hour to wake him up, you know. I don't think it's really that bad. I think consistent practice is really the key to it. You know, practicing is like saving money. If you just save $10 a week, for 25 years, you'll have a lot of money, or you'll certainly have money. Practicing is the same way. If you can practice an hour a day consistently for a year, It's just amazing how much you can improve. But most of us approach practicing like we do money. We keep desperately trying to figure out some way to go to the racetrack and win $1,000 in one afternoon. It generally doesn't work like that, and you can't practice 6 hours on Saturday because you have nothing to do that day, skip the rest of the week and average an hour a day. It doesn't work like that. You just lose what you got out of Saturday. My other thought on practicing is not really setting up your practice pad in front of the TV set on Sunday nights and wailing all the way through reruns of Mission Impossible. You know, it's not going to help you very much. Might be good for your circulation, but it's not going to help you play music. That slow to fast practicing is nice for a demonstration and everything, but actually, have you ever thought about this? The only person in a band whose sole responsibility is time and rhythm is the drummer. And that's the only instrument where they have us practice out of time. You go take a piano lesson, they get a metronome up there, you're tapping your foot, and you're playing the scales. I know, I took piano lessons as a kid. You study trumpet, saxophone, anything else. The first thing they teach you, tap your foot, play in time. But the drummer, they say, well, do this. And we're playing like waves, you know? The other thing they do, which is amazing, is the only guy in a band that has a right to tap his right foot loudly is the drummer. And usually some egomaniac bass player will come over and tell you, don't play the bass drum. Don't keep time on that. It might interfere with one of the notes that he's playing, you know. As a matter of fact, in most cases, with most bass players today, you probably should play the bass drum to cover up some of the out-of-tune notes. At least you may help the guy that way, you know. The other thing I can't stand is the bass player that's got an amplifier big enough to work the Grand Canyon alone, and he wants to set it right behind the drum set, you know. That's so loud that it blows your hair forward, you know. It's ridiculous, you know. He wants it that loud, let him stand in front of it. I got enough problems trying to hold these clowns together, you know. In any case, I think the best kind of practicing is in tempo, because that's what you're going to do. When you sit in with a group, they don't care how much technique you have or how little technique you have. They care about the time. Now, if you can practice so that you can develop a better sense of rhythm as well as technique, then you've got the whole ball of wax. Here's my favorite single-stroke exercise. Eighth notes, triplets, and sixteenths. No accents, no arm motion. Just turn your wrists and see if you can get the same tone quality, same volume level throughout each note value or each speed. And it doesn't have to be too fast to be helpful. Start out at a medium tempo like this. Most guys will do okay when they start out with the eighth note, say in here. But when they get ready to go to the triplets, they know that's faster, so they instinctively tighten up. If you're tightening up, you can tell by the sound. If you learn to trust your ear when you practice, really listen to what you're doing, and you start to get tense, you hear the tone quality change quite drastically. And by the time the guy gets to the 16th notes, it looks like his eyeballs are going to pop right out, you know. You've all seen that sort of thing. It took me weeks to learn how to do that incorrectly after practicing all these years so I could demonstrate it, but every job seems to have a unique set of problems, you know. Incidentally, I like jokes, and if I say anything during the next hour or so that you don't think is especially funny, just write it down on a piece of paper, throw it away later, that'll be fine. Doesn't really matter. Use your ear. Strive for tone quality, evenness, and time. Now, the second other skill I mentioned is double strokes. When I was a kid, they used to call that the mom and daddy roll. I don't know if they still use that expression, but I don't know. When I was about 6 or 7 years old and I was in there taking a lesson from a distinguished-looking grown-up, and he looked at me and said things like, Mama, Daddy, I thought the guy was pretty strange, you know. Even at the age of 6 or 7, I thought that was weird. Now, the tough thing about double strokes is drummers are constantly receiving bad information. In the event that we receive information that's correct, more often than not in the past, it's been incomplete. For example, if you pick up any rudimental drum book and look at the page where it has double strokes with a long roll on it, it always tells you that the second beat with each hand, you're playing double strokes, is a rebound. That's very nice. The only thing they forgot to tell you is that it only works if you can play fast. It's sort of like the two women who are terrific cooks. One makes a great main dish and the other one makes a fabulous dessert. The one that makes the dessert begins to get the idea that if the two of them were to trade recipes, then they could each make two terrific dishes. Now, we all know what big egos we all have because we all go to great lengths to hide them, you know, pretend to really be much nicer than we are, usually. You know, the old bit, gee, you sounded wonderful when a guy leaves the room saying he plays horrible. You know, it goes on all the time. So this one woman doesn't want to admit publicly that she doesn't really want to trade recipes. So when they do trade, she just leaves out one ingredient, like meat, sugar, some little goodie like that. So it never turns out right for the other person. Well, the same thing is true with double strokes, because if you can't use the rebound except when you play fast, how do you develop it? Well, you usually start out by trying to use the rebound slowly, and it sounds like this. I can tell by a couple of smiles in the audience that you're all familiar with that sound, you know. We've all struggled with it at one time or another. I studied with a man in New York City by the name of Henry Adler, who showed me a way to help you avoid that problem. You start double stroke slowly, start again with your wrist. Now you make your first stroke. Now from halfway up, another stroke, and try and get the same volume and tone quality that you did on the first one. So it's just a smaller wrist turn. Now that'll allow you to get nice even doubles at a slow rate of speed until you get enough strength and control to go fast enough to use the rebound. For example. Now up to about 120 beats a minute and 16th notes. 120 beats a minute is about the tempo of your average marching band. Up to that speed, that's a great technique, and it's a marvelous practice technique. Faster than that tempo approximately, now we can play double strokes by using the rebound. And that's played like this. You make one stroke with additional pressure with your fingers. You can get two beats about the same volume level, like this. Double strokes now, using the rebound at a faster rate of speed. Again, you can see how easy that was. As a matter of fact, I thought it was pretty good. Why don't you applaud for that? It might help your circulation. Now, why don't you hold all the questions until we get to it at one time? Okay? Can you remember what you had in mind? And then we'll get back to it. Was it about double strokes? Okay, why don't we do it now? Match grip. Well, the story on that is very simple. I went to a guy when I was about 10 years old to take a drum lesson. My problem was the same. I said, you know, my left hand is not as strong and as fast as my right hand. What can I do about it? He says, nothing. He said, the right hand is always going to be stronger and faster than the left hand. That's just a fact of life, kid. You'll have to accept it. I said, yeah, but I'm left-handed, which really blew his mind, you know. I wasn't, but I wanted to see if he had an answer for that one, you know. I said, you know, I don't think I agree with you. He says, why not? I said, well, if that's true for your hands, then the same thing ought to be true for your feet. And every time you tried to run, the left foot would keep getting behind, you'd fall down a lot, you know? So what that means is, if you're not getting the same sound or the same impact or speed with the left hand, you're probably not holding it or moving your wrist in exactly the same way, and you simply haven't practiced it enough. Because if you practice the drums as much as you do walking or running around, and you have a reasonably good grip on the stick, you won't have any trouble with your left hand. It's really just a matter of spending time at it. There's no big secret to it. In any case, leaping right ahead, the most basic combination of singles and doubles is a paradiddle. That's right, left, right, right. Two singles and a double, or left, right, left, left. Now, if you're about 10 years old and you're taking drum lessons, which I think is marvelous, I did the same thing, and you go to the drum lesson and you get a single paradiddle as part of your lesson. The first thing you'll notice at that age, most likely, is that there's a big accent over the first beat of each paradiddle, every fourth beat. This will probably be this 10-year-old's first opportunity to hit a snare drum as hard as humanly possible without feeling guilty. Now, his mother can't get mad at him, the teacher can't bug him, there's an accent, wham. Then he hopes those other three beats bounce in there before he goes wham with the other hand, you know? And it always sounds like this. The guy says, I think I'm getting faster. And naturally the response is, who cares, you know? Who needs a fast drummer that gets a horrible sound, plays out of time, and plays very unevenly? There are not too many bands that require that. Here's a good way to solve that problem, and the reason I mention it, it'll solve any problem of a similar nature, whether it's as basic as a paradiddle or a terribly complicated pattern. And that is, if you're having trouble with it, see if you can play it first with no accents. Once you have every beat in the right place, you've got it in time, then add the accents to it. You know, it's like sort of points it up a little bit. Try your paradiddles like this at first to get them even. That's just single paradiddles with no accents. Now, if you can do them evenly, not necessarily that fast, that may take a little practice, but if you can do them evenly, then you add the accent to it, it should sound pretty good. Okay, terrific. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. I'm a ham like most people that do this. I like applause as much as anybody else. Thank you, son. Enjoy that. Having a good, he's doing very well there. Or so I can see it, like he's doing terrific. One of the rudiments I always like to talk about on the clinic is the flam. Not because you use it so much at the drum set, but if you do any kind of studying, you should be able to control it and play it. If you're in a school band of any kind, you're going to have to play flams. And the reason that I also mention it is I have a weird sense of humor, as you may have noticed. Not always funny, but at least weird. And the way young people approach playing a flam sometimes is really strange, because as most of you know, it's a grace note followed by a main note. Well, some young guys, in an effort to get that grace note in the right place, will come up with some of the most extraordinary arm motions. As a matter of fact, if I went into a band room at 8 o'clock in the morning, imagine that there's a big glass wall between me and the drum section, like a recording studio. So I can see this young guy, but I can't hear him. I can tell by the arm motions in most cases if he's attempting to warm up playing the flam, because often it'll look like this. Now it's really a drag to stand next to someone like that in the drum section, because you may get a shot right in the ear at any moment. That's terribly painful. I like this one too. You can stab a flute player like that if you're not careful, you know. Now that's not such a tough rudiment, but we make it harder than it is. One of the key things that you should learn about drumming is that the secret of playing fast is to always be in a position to play the beat that's going to come up next. Here's a good example. Here's the right-hand part of a right-hand flam, which seems silly at first because it's just one beat, but if you watch carefully, I stop an inch from the drum. Now all I have to do to play the left-hand flam is tap gently and pick it up with that same wrist turn, and I've got the grace note for the left-hand flam. So in order to develop flams, practice this first. That's not hard. When you put it together, you have nice even flams at a reasonable volume level. Very easy. Now, another question I get a lot is, how do you warm up? I really get the impression that some guys think that you can warm up by going backstage and soaking your hands in lukewarm oatmeal, you know. And then you have big arguments about which brand is the best to soak your hands in. You know, guys get really strange ideas, you know. One of the best warm-ups is a flam paradiddle. If you've ever tried to play one, you know they're tough. They alternate, each one starts on the other hand. And the reason it's so hard to play fast is at one point in that rudiment, each hand has to play 4 beats in a row without resting. For example, I'll play the flam paradiddle, put the right hand up here so you can hear what each hand does separately. That means you can't play flam paradiddles any more effectively than you can play 4 beats in a row with each hand. So this is also a good warm-up, and it will help you develop the skills needed to play flam paradiddles with a little more control. If you can do that, playing flam paradiddles isn't too bad. That you can applaud for. That was pretty good. Once I get by that in the evening, I figure I'm safe, you know. It's a good warm-up. Really try it, and it'll help you a lot. I'm a firm believer in taking drum lessons. I think it's a great idea because you get the fundamentals down, you avoid some bad habits, you solve a lot of problems before you get to them, and that way you can concentrate on the music you want to play, which is the whole idea. And I must say that as a result of clinics and stage bands and records and books and more people teaching and percussion instructors at the university level, there are more good young drummers in America today than ever before in our history. As a matter of fact, all over the world. And I do a lot of traveling. In May, I'll be in Hawaii, New Zealand, Tahiti, Guam, Australia for 10 days, doing some finishing concerts, Hong Kong, Japan. And I see an awful lot of people play. And I've seen high school age drummers that can play good rock, can play with the stage band, can read, they have good technique, they can solo. The only thing is that with many young drummers, it seems like, even though they've developed a lot of technique, if you ask them to play a nice roll, now, the beautiful thing about that is you don't even have to play fast to play a roll. It requires no speed at all. You don't even have to turn your wrist, just barely. The reason we have so much trouble with that is drummers have been subjected to the worst form of musical instruction of any instrument in the history of Western civilization. The more dummies teaching or writing drum books and wandering around the country giving advice you can shake a stick at, 9 out of 10 of these clowns would do us a great favor if they all went to jail, you know. Now, the reason that I mention this is we've all had to fight that roll thing. And I paid good money to get advice, and what I usually heard was this. If you want to develop a roll, start out slowly with double strokes like this. And get gradually faster until it eventually sounds like this, nice and smooth. The only thing is that's a lie. It's not possible to do that. Because double strokes played as fast as possible sound like double strokes played as fast as possible. That makes a lot of sense, right? If you want that other sound, you've got to use a buzz or a multiple bounce, like this. You just sort of raise and lower your hands. And you can't do that playing doubles. Now, what's the correct roll? Very simple. If you're playing in a marching band and you're outside on a parade drum with 1 S6 and there's 6 drummers playing, open double strokes is the correct roll, like this. If you're playing that same pattern inside the concert band or at the drum set, you should use the buzz technique and it should sound like this. There's nothing worse than going to hear a nice high school concert band play and they start out to play something like the Poet and the Peasant Overture. There's a guy in the back row playing a little 9-stroke roll like this, behind an oboe solo. It should sound like. So the correct roll for all of the situations other than outside is the buzz or multiple bounce roll. Now, one reason there's so much confusion about it is the drum contest. Now, when I was 12 years old, I went to the first local music festival, and I had to play a little drum solo. I think I played The Downfall of Paris, grade 4. Not a fabulous piece of music, but a nice little rudimental solo. And I knew the judge was going to ask me to play several rudiments, and they always asked for one in particular, the long roll. Now, if you went to a true rudimental drum contest, the long roll is double strokes throughout. Rudimental drummers don't use the buzz, so you would play it more or less like... Take 4 or 5 minutes to play it, drag it out. It's more dramatic. You'll probably get a better rating, but that's the idea. Now, when I was 12, I didn't have enough speed, control, or technique to play doubles fast enough to complete the middle part of that rudiment. So I did what all my friends were doing. When I got the doubles about as fast as I could go, I'd try to sneak into the buzz technique to fill up the middle of it, make the judge think I was cooking on that roll and get a gold medal. Because when you're 12 years old, the idea of a gold medal is incredible. I would have sold my little brother for that gold medal at the age of 12, you know. You're not quite as honorable as you learn to be later on, you know, because when you're young, you get excited, you say, man, I got to have that medal, I'll do anything. And you don't care whether it's right or not, because you want to win a contest, right? A friend of mine had a wonderful technique, and it works beautifully. When the doubles got about as fast as he could go, then he would allow them to get real sloppy. Then it was a little easier to sneak into the buzz technique. He always got great ratings. But in order to play it safe, he used a special gimmick. At this critical changeover from the doubles to the buzz, he would begin to look up at the ceiling and as though water had mysteriously started to drip on it from somewhere above, you know. It looked kind of like this. Now the judge is looking all over the room, right? Maybe there's something happening he doesn't know about. You know, earthquake, somebody left the shower on, hot water pipes just broke, you know. He missed the role completely. And he's not going to admit that he missed that. He's the judge. So he says, get the kid off the stage, give him a great rating, we'll get the next one out here. Who will know, right? Now, this is a great technique, because at most high school drum contests, your judge is probably going to be a trumpet player anyway. If you think about it. Now, I have nothing against trumpet players judging drum contests. At least it keeps them off the streets, you know. Keeps them from sitting in with some young band and destroying a perfectly good young rhythm section. You know, I figure that my parents always taught me that respect was a two-way street, that everything is supposed to work both ways. Now, I figured throughout my career, I joined Benny Goodman's band when I was 20. I joined Woody Herman's band when I was 19. I was on staff at NBC in New York City playing television shows by the time I was 25. I used to play the Merv Griffin Show, The Tonight Show, Jack Parr Show. I even played quiz programs like Play Your Hunch, Bet Your Wife, Lose Your Car, all the big shows, you know. Let's face it, you know, the dumb shows pay as much as the good ones. You know, the scale is the same. So I figured throughout all those years, you know, I must have played with some pretty good trumpet players. So why can't I judge a trumpet contest? And the first thing I'd ask those clowns to do if I was judging is get that trumpet, and number one, see if you can tap your foot evenly 4 beats of the bar for the first time in your life. Because all melody players tap their foot according to the rhythm or the melody that they're playing, not according to the rhythm. And then see if they can play quarter note triplets for the first time in their life without slowing down. Because every band I've ever been in, when they play quarter note triplets, the rhythm goes right out the window, you know. Now this is 3 against 2, or 6 against 4. Now you couldn't possibly expect a melody player to do something like this and talk at the same time, because they lack sufficient coordination for this type of thing, you know. However, let's be fair about it. You know, you can't actually talk and play the trumpet anyway. You hurt your mouth, and that's not fair. So, the problem is essentially this. You should practice double strokes, and you should practice your buzz separately, and never the twain shall meet. Now, if you have to do it that way, because there are a bunch of idiots running a contest that don't know the difference, play it that way, get the gold medal, and forget about it. You know, I don't want you to lose a contest because of doing the right thing. You know, I mean, life is like that sometimes. But don't practice that way. The other thing that destroys more good rolls is this one, the rubber practice pad. The true purpose of a rubber practice pad is to prevent other people from physically attacking you while you're practicing. It's quiet. It's no help at all. As a matter of fact, in retaliation, last year, to get even with this idea, I invented the practice trumpet. It's a mouthpiece on the end of a long cardboard tube. When the guy gets his chops up, we'll give him the horn, and then he can play a couple melodies after about a year or two. Wasn't it humiliating when you went to take a drum lesson? You got that crummy block of wood with the rubber nail to it, and the guy said, if you're a good boy and practice all your rudiments in 2 or 3 years, we'll get you a little cymbal, but don't be too loud about it. That's pretty hard to get emotionally excited practicing on a rubber pad that has about as much dynamic value as a runaway typewriter. Tickety, tickety, tick, that's about it, you know? Now, let's be honest. This is a loud instrument, and we have to be considerate. If you practice on your drum set at 12 o'clock at night in an apartment building, if your father doesn't throw you out the window, all the neighbors will gang up in the morning and throw things at you when you leave the house, you know. So we do have to be careful that we don't drive other people crazy. So use a practice pad. It's a great thing, except for one thing. You can't develop a good buzz roll on a rubber practice pad because the rebound response rate of rubber is slower than that of a drum head. Also, it bounces, but it doesn't give, so it doesn't help you at all. This means that you have to press much harder to keep the stick buzzing than you do on a snare drum. When you press harder, each buzz gets shorter. Your hands go faster, and you press harder, so you can hear what you're doing, because the practice pad is not very loud. And you wind up with a very scrubby roll. Here's the best way to check yourself out. See if you can play a buzz roll on a snare drum at a soft volume level with the snares off, and try and get this sound. Now, if I just increase the downward pressure, like the bad habit that I got into on that rubber pad, and I won't change anything else, just the amount of downward pressure, you can hear the sound change drastically. So if you're getting a scrubby roll, you're pressing too hard. You can't get a roll by pressing the sticks and digging them in the head like that. You know, you all heard the guys with the lumpy right hand? So the guy thinks to himself, most young guys figure the faster they play, the better they sound. So I'll just speed up my hands, and then the roll will sound better. Then it'll sound like this. A guy came up to me about 3 weeks ago and said, Mr. Burns, I can't play a soft roll. I'm getting right near the edge of the drum, and I can't get it soft. I said, well, let me see you do it once, and he goes like this. Never happened, right? He may break his arm, but he's never going to play a roll that sounds like anything. Don't press too hard, and don't go too fast. See, that's another misconception. If you get a nice full buzz with each hand, you don't have to go like a buzzsaw. You ever notice sometimes you watch a good drummer play at a distance and he plays a beautiful roll, it seems like the hands are moving so slowly, you know, if you've not been practicing this manner. Give you an example. I'll play some single taps. I'll replace each tap with a buzz to show you that you don't have to go too fast to produce a nice full roll sound. Like this. Try that. Thank you. I think if you try that, you'd be amazed at how much better your roll will be in a very short period of time. Keep the sticks as level to the head as possible. Nice full buzz with each hand. Keep a reasonably firm grip on the stick. A lot of guys think being relaxed means using no grip. You know, if the stick's moving all around your hand, you have a firm point of control on it. It's going to be hard for you to play well. I always worry when I tell people to keep a reasonably firm grip, because I know there are 2 guys here at least who tomorrow are going to try to practice that roll, and they're going to squeeze the stick so hard their fingernails are going to turn blue. And nobody wants a drummer in a band with blue fingernails. They really think you're weird, you know. So just a reasonably firm grip. Don't squeeze it to death, you know. Now, drummers and drum teachers are pretty weird. You know, I was sort of kidding trumpet players before, or if you've ever noticed, any band you've ever been in, you'll have a lead guitar player up in front of the band and wearing like 8-inch heels, stomping his feet in a wildly spastic manner in an effort to impress all the young ladies in the audience that he was born with rhythm. The fact that all that clumping around up there in front has nothing to do with the tempo the drummer's playing is beside the point. Because if he gets his fingers caught in the strings playing one of those 3 chord changes he's worked out with the capos that can change keys, you know. If he gets really hung up, all he has to do to get himself off the hook in front of the audience is give the drummer a look like this. The other bit is to walk over to the side of the stage while you're playing. You've all seen that, you know. Another guy in the group comes over and he says, George, you're not playing like yourself tonight. What's the matter? He says, that drummer, I can't play with that guy. He says, the best drummer we've ever had. He keeps really good time, gets a beautiful sound, tunes the drums nicely, he has great technique, plays wonderful fill-ins. He never overplays or plays anything unnecessarily complicated, plays fantastic drum solos, and yet if we forget to feature him some night, he never complains. He never asks to be featured. He's the only guy in the band that can read. He saved us last week when we had to play for that other singer at that industrial show. He's a terrific worker. He gets to the job early, unloads all the amplifiers, and opens the guitar cases, you know. And the guy says, that's not the point. He just doesn't get the right rhythmic feeling. Another bad chord change, another goof in the tempo, and another dirty look. By the end of the night, everybody in the whole band hates the drummer. Now, the reason that this happens so much, and you've all heard lines like this, you know, 9 musicians and a drummer. Oh, you mean you have music for drums? I thought you just had to pound on them. That's another cutie I like, you know. I'm sick of stuff like that. But drummers invite this attitude because generally they know less about their own instrument than any other guy in the band. And the only way to get people to respect you is to know what you're doing. It's not enough to count on inspiration and hope you feel good and you can play over your head that night. The only way you can be consistent is to develop enough control, enough information about your instrument that you can play pretty well even when you may not feel good. And that's the key to being successful in any kind of performance, you know. Now, I'm remembering a guy in New York City who was a drum teacher. Now, I know there's several guys here that teach at the Simon Music Center. I've met several of them. I think it's my 3rd trip here. And I know that they're all down there trying to do a really sincere job. I know they stress fundamentals. They ask you to get a practice pad, probably, and some sticks, a book, learn how to read a little bit, practice some of the rudiments, you know. listen to music, practice every day, rehearse with a group. That's all good stuff. You can't go wrong. Because no teacher can teach you how to play. No teacher can give you a guarantee that you'll be successful. All he can do is give you information, technique, and tools, teach you something about music, and then the rest of it's up to you. It's your talent that has to come to the surface. He's just going to help you get that out where it's visible. Now, there's certain kinds of teachers that you should avoid. Or there's certain types of drummers. I call them brainwashers. They're the type of guys who say things like, there's nobody in this town good enough for me to play with. But they will go all to all the clubs and criticize every drummer in town and put everybody down. But they never want to show up and play. And they're continually confusing you with bad advice because they desperately want to feel important. Well, I'm not that important. I just try to play as well as I can, and I want real information. A good example. This is a true story. There's a guy in New York City that charges like $15 a lesson. Before a youngster is allowed to take the first lesson, he has to purchase an 18-inch practice pad, 18 inches square, which this clown builds in his garage out of old 2x4s and Goodyear tire rubber rejects, I think, But it's $85. Figuring that this guy was not on the level, I said, what's the purpose of a huge pad like that when in order to play a soft roll like I did before, you have to play in an area the size of a half a dollar with both sticks? He said, well, a lot of kids today don't have much control, and with a great big pad like this, I figure they'll never miss it. He wasn't trying to be funny. He also has great big heavy metal drumsticks manufactured with his name imprinted on them. He sells those to you for $15 a pair. Also, before you're allowed to take the first lesson. This guy's got you for like $125. You haven't even seen the first page of a drum book yet, Now, I said, what's the purpose of those heavy metal sticks? He said, well, your hands will get strong if you practice with these. I said, that sounds pretty good. Then what happens? He says, then you can play faster. I said, that's interesting because I don't believe I've ever seen a fast weightlifter. Let's apply the same approach to another instrument. Do you really think that Doc Severson stuffs a rag in the end of the trumpet to make it harder to blow so he can build up more endurance? He'd just have the worst hernia in the history of playing the trumpet in 10 minutes. He'd be on his way to the hospital, the emergency ward, Arnold Palmer doesn't warm up with a 250-pound golf club. He couldn't get it out on the golf course, What caddy would want to carry that monster, Mark Spitz, the Olympic swimmer, didn't put on a lead suit every day and whip off 100 laps in the pool if the weight didn't get him to rust wood, That's ridiculous, Get a regular pair of drumsticks, learn something about music, and practice. A drumstick only weighs about 3 or 4 ounces. So you don't have to be a super athlete, There's one guy, and I always tell this story in clinics because it's true. He has each student in, this is a guy, another idiot in New York, has each student start the lesson like this, reaching as far around as possible and practicing like that for about 15 minutes. I said, what can the reason for that possibly be? He said, well, when you come back to this position, it's real easy. I said, I think I'm beginning to understand you, which worried me. I said, is that anything like banging your head against the wall because it feels so good when you stop? All I know is that it has nothing to do with music, I went to a guy's house one day, he's sitting in front of the TV set watching a baseball game, squeezing rubber balls, presumably to strengthen his hands. So I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm practicing. I said, gee, sounds wonderful. I can't wait to hear the album, What is that, You have to practice by creating a sound. That's the only bad thing about a rubber practice pad. It has no sound for you to work with. Now, it's necessary for you to use it, Don't say that I said you don't have to use it. It's a good idea. But when you can, as much as you can, practice on the drum itself. Stay late after school or put your drums in the garage or tell your father if you let you practice another hour, you'll wash the car, something even as drastic as that perhaps, It's a lot better than having him hit you over the head with a baseball bat because you're making too much noise. My favorite one, though, is the guy, the same idiot with the big pads, invented the square drumstick. Also true. This part of the stick is for real. From here on back, it's perfectly square. He brought these by a club where I was working in New York City and asked me to try them. I said, I don't think I can make it because those corners are going to cut into my hand. I hit a loud rim shot, and it's going to be painful. One thing I've always tried to avoid in my life is pain. I never saw any particular benefit in it. So I refused to try them. He says, you've got to try these sticks. I said, well, could you just give me one good reason why they're so terrific? He said, sure. He said, if you have to leave them on the drum for any length of time, they'll never roll off.
Oh, geez.
True. Now, if you get around a guy like this, save your money. This guy that I'm speaking of has about 150 drum books on the market. Mails out stuff all over the country. I don't like to mention names because I don't want to publicize them, and I'm not here for the purpose of putting them down. All I'm saying is this. When you go to a teacher, if he says to you, get a reasonable grip on the drumstick, be able to play through all the rudiments, learn how to read a little bit so you can write down a rhythm. If you can count up to 4, you can read music on the drums. It's the easiest reading in the world, of all instruments practically, you know. You have other problems, but the reading is very simple. If you do it every day for about 6 weeks, you'll never have a reading problem. It's easy. The other thing is, if he tells you to listen to all kinds of different people, practice every day, and play in any kind of musical group that you possibly can to get experience, this guy's on the level, and he'll probably help you. The other thing, too, is sometimes young drummers' greatest problems stem from the fact that they have no idea what they sound like. Now, if you don't know what you really sound like, how can you sit in with a group and make an intelligent musical contribution to any style? Generally, we think we sound like whichever guy we admire the most. Now, you may or you may not. I'll give you a good example. I gave two of my two children tape recorders, cassette tape recorders for Christmas about 2 years ago. At that time, my youngest son was about 11. And it's amazing how big that ego is, you know, even at the age of 11. Because the first thing he did was grab that tape recorder, run into his room, and lock the door. He came back about 20 minutes all upset. He said, Dad, there's something wrong with this tape recorder. I said, well, what do you think the trouble is? He said, it doesn't work. It doesn't sound like my voice. I said, well, let me hear it. And he played it back, and I said, that sounds like your voice to me. He said, well, it doesn't sound like my voice to me. I said, well, your voice to you doesn't sound like it does to other people. So the same thing is true of your playing. John Beck, who teaches at the Eastman School of Music, and Jim Petershack, who helped me on the book that goes with the album that Pat was talking about, has a great technique. When this young guy came in to take a lesson from Jim, he was playing single strokes like this. Unbeknownst to the student, Jim's got a tape recorder on. And he asked the student if he thought these single strokes were even enough. The guy says, yeah. Because we get used to hearing our own mistakes. We don't realize it. So Jim waited about a week or so. And when the guy came in for his lesson the next time, he said, I want you to hear something from one of my students. Tell me what you think of these single strokes. And he heard this. He says, wow, it sounds to me like the right hand is way too heavy. Jim says, that's you, baby. There's the data on the tape, you know. Use that tape recorder. It'll save you a lot of hassles. And if you're in an argument with the bass player, because I've never been in a group yet where if there was something going on in the band rhythmically, where there was difficulty, like the tempos are rushing or slowing down, have you ever noticed that all the guys in the front line go back and ask the bass player, what's the problem? Why don't they ask us? 9 out of 10 cases, the problem's probably the bass player anyway, you know. They have too much power with those amplifiers. They can take over a band rhythm, you know. Now, it's very difficult to say he's rushing, and he says, no, he's rushing, and a big argument takes place, and you're very unhappy. Here's a good way to solve it. Take the tape recorder, a cassette recorder, to the job one night, put it on the floor, and record 2 or 3 sets. And then wait about a week or so, and play the tape for whoever it is that's goofing, if it's not you. Also, that gives you time to check it out. If it sounds like you're the one who's rushing, then you keep your mouth shut and cool it. If it turns out that it is the bass player that's rushing, you can play the tape for him and prove it. And that ends the argument, because tape recorders don't lie to you. They might lie about acoustics, but never about rhythms. So if you're worried about your time, use a tape recorder to help you a lot. Now, here's the technique I want to mention while I have the drum up here. Since this is the grip, if you remember, I can use these fingers now to motivate the drumstick with very little or no wrist motion. Now, this is not a technique for power. It's for speed, delicacy, and control. Don't practice with a real heavy stick thinking you're going to strengthen the muscles in these fingers to go faster, because I know a guy that did that, and he injured one of the tiny little muscles in here and had to have an operation. So the trick here is control, not brute force. If you want volume, use your wrist or your arms. Anyway, this looks about like this, slowly. Now, everybody uses their fingers on a drumstick instinctively. Any jazz drummer that plays a fast tempo on the right cymbal like this is using their fingers to get the third key down. Every time you play double strokes, using your fingers to control the rebound. It's just a way of taking it a step further. And it is an advanced technique. So don't practice it until you've got your wrists and your arms pretty well together. Now, on the left hand, since the grip is here, I use the first 2 fingers to push directly down on the stick. And you can get pretty fast with very little or no wrist motion. I'll try to turn Excuse me, turn this so you can all see it. Now, if you're going to try this sort of thing, what you must avoid is getting a distorted hand position in an effort to get the stick to bounce with your fingers. For example, on the right hand, don't come way under like this, because you'll never get back out here for the next thing with wrist. Remember that thing about always being in a position to play the next beat. So just turn your hand very slightly so you can pull it against the thumb. And then you don't have a huge adjustment in hand position. If you're going to use a traditional grip, don't turn way over like this and try to do this. Because now the next thing is with wrist, somehow you've got to get way back over there. That's really tough. So what I do is if I turn the wrist like this and make contact about here, very slight adjustment, I can push straight down on the stick. Also, if the snare drum is too low, remember what we said about the belt buckle. If the snare drum is too low, you try to use your fingers, stick will have a tendency to go from side to side rather than straight up and down. Get the snare drum up where you can reach it, and try to do it from about the end of this. I'll give you a good example. I'll play some fast 8 notes with wrist, 16-note triplets with fingers. You can see that I get back and forth with the two techniques smoothly without a huge adjustment in the hand. Over to the drum set. Have you ever noticed that drummers seem to have the biggest ego problem of all instrumentalists? I don't know exactly why drummers are the worst offenders they are. What it really comes down to is playing in such a way that you hope to impress someone else who plays the same instrument. And this kind of thinking usually results in one of two things. The guy's playing the drums, another drummer comes into the room, and he realizes there's another drummer watching him. He usually reacts in one of two ways, like he gets so nervous that he drops both sticks and can't play at all and makes that excuse like he just suddenly discovered he had an upset stomach and will have to leave the room. That's old school. The other reaction is often to begin to hit everything on the drum set as loud and as fast as humanly possible in an effort to impress this other guy. Unfortunately, some guys are so anxious to impress him that they may do this suddenly in the middle of a very slow ballad, which really upsets the rest of the band. You know, like, don't let him play any more solos, he's driving us all nuts, you know? Now, one of the things that perpetuates this kind of competition is this put-down attitude that drummers seem to have towards one another. They're the least cooperative group of instrumentalists in the world. It's like professional quarterbacks all hate each other. Professional drummers seem to go through the same syndrome for a while, you know? Why, I don't know. Bass players don't act like that, piano players don't. But drummers are something else. Now, here's a perfect example. This guy goes out to hear another drummer play. He's not going out hoping that this other drummer is any good. He's actually going out there hoping that the guy doesn't play very well. And then he's going to make some mistakes. And then this cat that was there watching him can run downtown the next day, hit all the music stores, the musicians union, all the high school band rehearsals, and describe in great detail how badly this other guy played the night before. Now, I suppose the reason that this is such a popular pastime is it's one way to make yourself feel superior without doing any work. Now, let's suppose that you go out to put this guy down and he really turns out to be a monster of a player. Absolutely super. But then the old cop-out is, well, I don't like that style. I don't like guys that play rock, or I don't like guys that play jazz, or I don't like guys that play country. You can always get it off the hook that way. The only thing is that the guy who's practicing at the end of 20 years plays pretty good. The guy who spends all of his time putting other people down only improves at putting people down. So that is not really conducive to helping your playing. For example, this guy goes out to hear this other drummer, goes in a nightclub, he stands over behind the corner of the service bar, where the waitress has come to get the drinks for tables. He orders a Coca-Cola. A Coca-Cola, although it's a deadly substance, a ruin your stomach. But in any case, it's the cheapest thing you can buy in a nightclub. Because you're not going to spend a lot of money to put this guy down. You're going to save that to buy the next record album to get your next original idea off of, right? If it's a hip record, you don't even let your friends hear it. You want them to think you made those beats up yourself. Then he stands right in the corner underneath the air conditioning vent, which will ruin your neck, and looks up and studies the ceiling in an effort to appear inconspicuous. The only thing is that the drummer that's playing on stage knows anybody in there standing around the corner of the service bar, nursing a Coca-Cola underneath the air conditioning vent and studying the ceiling in an effort to be inconspicuous must be another drummer. Nobody else ever stands there. The guy on stage spotted that clown the minute he walked in the door, you know? Now, he pretends not to see him. He's looking all around the club, but every now and then he checks him out of the corner of his eye to make sure he's still over there in the corner. Now, what he's going to do in an effort to impress this guy, he has a little drum solo he always plays every night at the end of the first set. It's early in the evening, so he only plays about 2 minutes. So he's going to put everything in that 2-minute solo that he's practiced, read about, discussed, heard of, dreamt of, or made an effort to develop over the past 9.5 years. Now, in order to get all these wonderful hot licks in less than 2 minutes, he's going to have to play 5 times faster than he's ever played before in his entire life. He will also have to play all kinds of wild crossovers and patterns between the tom-toms and cymbals in an effort to get all those beats in there. And he'll probably wind up playing a lot of rhythmic figures he has no possible way of understanding. This might be referred to as playing over your head. The thing is, he figures if he can pull this whole mess off and he gets lucky, the other drummer will have to come rushing up to him at the end of this thing and say, "Man, I hate to admit it, but that was a great drum solo." Then he can look this guy right in the eye and say, "Hey, man, you gotta know there's another drummer out there. See, my mother's been sick, flu for about 5 or 6 weeks, and I haven't had a chance to practice at home. Chumps from the beat. I've got the flu myself, I almost ain't come to work tonight, but I'll drink some coffee. If you're around later, I'll see if I can put down some of my